Now part of the Darkcast network. Welcome to Indie Podcasts with a dark side.
On the evening of May 8th, 2008, 52-year-old Thomas William Randolph, known as Tommy, called 911 from the Las Vegas home he shared with his sixth wife, 47-year-old Sharon Cause. Quote, "My wife's been shot and there's a guy in my house and I shot him." The dispatcher asked if the other man had also been injured, and Tommy responded with, quote, "I hope he's dead." According to Tommy, he and Sharon had gone out for Mother's Day dinner and planned to see a movie. Sharon loved going to movies, but Tommy told investigators that she had changed her mind and wanted to go back home instead. When they arrived, Sharon went inside the house before him while he parked the car. By the time Tommy followed her inside, he said that she was lying face down in the hallway. He called her name, but she didn't answer. He went to a closet where he kept a 9mm handgun, put the weapon in his pocket, and started looking around the house. He said that a man wearing a black ski mask suddenly rushed towards him and reached for a gun tucked into his waistband. Tommy said he pushed the man away and began firing. He claimed the intruder ran down the hallway towards the garage while he continued shooting. Afterwards, Tommy said he heard another noise from inside the garage and was scared that the man was still alive, so he went to the garage and fired again. Once the man stopped moving, Tommy went back to the house but did not immediately go to Sharon. He said that he was concerned that another intruder could still be hiding somewhere inside, so he searched the rooms before returning to the hallway. When he finally reached Sharon, he turned on the light, saw the amount of blood surrounding her, and called 911. The emergency dispatcher tried to guide Tommy through helping his wife, but the dispatcher did not feel like Tommy was trying to help her. For instance, each time the dispatcher instructed him to place Sharon on her back and start CPR, Tommy talked about something else. He asked if he should search for the intruder's gun instead and went to the garage and removed the gun from the man's hand. The dispatcher again told him to return to his wife. Then he wanted to go and get his own weapon because, according to him, he was worried that the man might not be dead and could still shoot him. After this, the dispatcher heard him put the phone down, call Sharon's name, and then stopped responding to the dispatcher for some time. When he returned to the call, he said that he couldn't roll her onto her back. Eventually, he turned Sharon over and started screaming after seeing the gunshot wound to her face. Although Tommy said he believed that she was already dead, the dispatcher still instructed him to begin chest compressions. By the time Tommy finally started giving Sharon CPR, the dispatcher had to redirect him back to trying to save her life between 12 and 15 times. When police got to the house, Sharon could not be saved. She had been killed by a single gunshot wound to the head, fired from the other man's weapon. The masked man was also dead, shot 5 times with Tommy's handgun, including once in the head. Now, who was this gunman? Why and how did this happen? Just what is going on? Well, I am Kai, and this is Love and Murder, Heartbreak to Homicide, and I am here to bring you all of those answers. But before I do, don't forget to subscribe to Love and Murder on whatever platform you're on so you don't miss another case. But the best place to subscribe is on the Patreon for free, patreon.com/Love and Murder. You won't miss another case, and you do get some bonuses of being a free subscriber. Patreon.com/Love and Murder. Now let's get back into the question of how, why, who, what, where, and when did all of this happen. Police identified the man in the garage as 38-year-old Michael James Miller, a Las Vegas handyman Tommy and Sharon had hired to complete odd jobs around their home. At first, the scene appeared to support Tommy's account. Michael had a gun, and near his body, investigators found the ski mask, gloves, and a change of clothes, and what appeared to be costume jewelry. So it looked like Tommy had gotten home, discovered an intruder attacking his wife, and then shot the man in self-defense. However, as time passed, Las Vegas Metro Police Detective Dean O'Kelly and Rob Wilson soon began noticing details that did not fit Tommy's version of the shooting. During the days that followed, Tommy participated in a detailed video walkthrough of the house. For more than 55 minutes, he led detectives through each step of his story, showing them where he found Sharon, where he got the gun, how Michael rushed towards him, and where each part of the shooting allegedly occurred. While he was going through this horrific account, investigators noted that Tommy appeared casual at times and didn't even cry at all. While describing how he found Sharon on the hallway floor, he started talking about her habit of leaving several pairs of shoes around the house and how often he had tripped on them, like, "Sir, your wife is dead." And rather than appearing focused on the fact that his wife had just been killed, he seemed comfortable performing for the camera and telling the story in great detail. Tommy had described Michael as a masked intruder, but he also admitted during the 911 call that he knew him. Michael had worked inside the home, spent time with Tommy, and was not a stranger who had randomly selected the house. And when asked about this, Tommy tried to explain that Michael had previously stolen from him and tried to take advantage of him. Tommy reminded officers of the items found near Michael's body. You remember all the jewelry, the costume jewelry? See, he was trying to steal from me again. And he was using that as proof that he had broken into the house to commit burglary. Then the ski mask was another inconsistency in Tommy's story. If Michael had been wearing it during those close-range shootouts that Tommy had described, where was the blood or the bullet damage to the mask? The items inside the bags also seem suspicious. Like, now that we think about it, rather than convincing detectives that they were looking at a burglary, the clothing and costume jewelry started looking like things that were placed at the scene to make it appear that a burglary had happened. Finally, the physical evidence from the shooting created even more questions. Tommy had claimed that he encountered Michael inside the house, fired at him as he ran down the hallway, and then followed him towards the garage. But investigators found no blood, bullets, or shell casings in the hallway where Tommy said the exchange started. All of the evidence connected to Michael's shooting was only inside the garage. The trajectory of the bullets also didn't match the movements Tommy demonstrated when he reenacted the confrontation. The evidence suggested that Michael had been shot in a different position and under different circumstances than Tommy had described. As I said, Michael had been shot 5 times, and investigators believed that the final gunshot to his head looked less like an act of self-defense and more like an execution. Police also learned that a neighbor reported hearing the gunshots more than 10 minutes before Tommy had called 911. And Tommy tried to explain that by saying that he had tried to call from another phone inside the house, but the service wasn't working, and then he found Sharon's cell phone and then tried again, only to receive a busy signal, and then he continued calling until someone finally answered. Detective O'Kelly said Tommy became a suspect almost as soon as he arrived at the house because the more closely investigators examined the scene, the less it looked like a random home invasion. They even started to question whether Michael had been expected at the house and whether Tommy already knew why he was there. Then Detective O'Kelly and Detective Wilson started looking into Tommy's past. Tommy was born in 1955 in Fairfield, Illinois. His father served in the Air Force and his mother, Dorothy Arlene Randolph, worked as a bookkeeper. He grew up in what was described as a loving household, developed an extroverted and flirtatious personality, and dreamed of becoming a rock and roll star. As an adult, Tommy described himself as someone who loved love, romance, and attention. In 1975, when Tommy was 20 years old, he married 18-year-old Catherine Thomas, known as Kathy, after she became pregnant. The couple went on to have 2 more children together, including a daughter named Krista, but the marriage only lasted about 7 years. Kathy would later describe Tommy as controlling and psychologically abusive. In fact, during one argument, he got angry because a bowl of oatmeal wasn't sweet enough for him, and he threw it against a wall. I'm going to pause right here. You would not believe me if I told you how many people from that era meaning like the 1955 era, that I've heard talk about men in their lives or men that they knew doing something like this. They didn't like the food and they threw it against a wall. Now, I got to tell you, maybe it was those times, but I think I would have been single because I think now and then I don't have the personality for that. If you don't like the food that I cook to the point that you're throwing it on the wall, number one, don't ever expect me to cook again. You can cook your own food because you know exactly how you like it. So you cook your own food. Number two, I'm not cleaning that up. And I know divorce wasn't that easy back then. So number three, I guess I'm just stuck here or whatever, but don't ever ask me to do anything else ever again in this house. I'm not touching anything. If you don't like something, like the bowl of oatmeal that wasn't sweet enough, get some sugar and mix it in. The sugar's going to melt and they'll make it as sweet as you want. Number two, start cooking your own oatmeal because you know exactly how sweet you like it. Number three, there are a lot of adults out there who can't handle their emotions, who don't know how to handle anger, frustration, annoyance. What is wrong with you people? And I'm talking about the ones who can't handle their emotions. Why would you think the most logical way to solve a problem is to insult the person who did something for you? Not that they had to, because believe it or not, some of the men out there, women are not your property and they're not there to cook your food. We're not your mama. Okay? We're your wives. We're not your freaking mama. So this person, woman or man, your partner did you a favor by cooking for you and you didn't like it. And the way that you express that is to berate, throw something against a wall. Like, grow all the frick up. Grow up. And these are the same people that expect everybody else to regulate their emotions and expect children to regulate their emotions too. But when it comes to them, they can't regulate their emotions at all. Everybody else around them is supposed to, but they can't. Do you know anybody who talks about this kind of stuff happening? Oh, my mom cooked something and my dad didn't like it, so he sent it sailing against the wall. I personally know somebody who talks about that as an endearing feature. Don't ask me how that's endearing. I personally know somebody who talks like that. Do you? Is it just me? Do you know people from that era or even from now? Don't act like it's just back then. Do you know anybody who talks like that and acts like this is normal? Kathy also said that at one point, Tommy took out a life insurance policy on her. Eventually, Kathy left the marriage, remarried, and moved to Washington with her new husband. Her divorce from Tommy became final on April 7th, 1983, and on that very same day, the exact same day, Tommy married his second wife, Becky Galt. 3 years later, in 1986, Becky was found dead inside their Utah home. She had been laying in her waterbed, still tucked in beneath the covers, and had been shot in the head. Her death was ruled a suicide. How? She shot herself and then tucked herself in? What? How was that ruled a suicide? Anyways, her death was ruled a suicide, and Tommy, who was the beneficiary of 5 different life insurance policies, collected about $500,000. Then, almost 2 years later, one of Tommy's former friends came forward with information that made authorities take another look at Becky's death. I mean, personally, I don't know why her being still tucked into bed with a gunshot wound to her head didn't make authorities look differently at the situation in the first place, because obviously, but I guess so. It took one of his former friends to come forward, and that former friend was Eric Tarantino, who had also worked as a handyman for Tommy. According to Eric, Tommy had spent around 8 months trying to convince him to kill Becky in exchange for part of the insurance money. Does this sound familiar? Eric said that they talked about several ways to make her death look accidental, like causing a car crash, using cyanide, slamming her head against a bathtub, or killing her during a staged burglary. Sound familiar? But Eric never went through with any of those plans. His story was still enough for authorities to charge Tommy with Becky's murder, but before Eric could testify, Tommy tried to have him killed. He offered cash and the title to a car to an undercover police officer that he believed was a hitman and asked him to whack Eric. Look. First of all, I'm not going to somebody who calls himself a hitman. That's just first of all, because to me, I feel like I would then be a loose end. Like you would do what I asked you to do, but then I'm a loose end. So after you get the money from me, then you're going to take me out too. That's just me and my paranoia. But secondly, I have done way too many of these episodes where the hitman turns out to be a cop. Have you people learned nothing? Just get a divorce. Leave the person alone. But I know it's not about that. So he wanted that $500,000 because he had 5 different life insurance policies on her. And remember, his first wife, he asked her to take out a life insurance policy on herself. And she was like, you know what? I'm going to leave this marriage. So all the peace outs and I'll see you later. Then she moved to a whole other state. So even though it came out that Tommy tried to have Eric whacked, during his trial, the jury couldn't hear about that. They couldn't hear about this attempt. So without that background, and even with Eric's accusations, so Eric said, he got to testify and everything, but they didn't hear that Tommy tried to have him whacked. So even with all of that, a jury acquitted Tommy of Becky's murder in 1989 after his attorneys argued that she had died by suicide. And I wonder if they got to see, the picture of how she was when police got there. Because if you're describing it as being tucked in bed with a bullet wound to your head, my question is how? Did she shoot herself? And as she lay dying, she tucked herself in? This is my question. But Tommy did plead guilty to felony witness tampering for trying to have Eric killed, and he spent a very short time in prison. After his release, Tommy just continued getting married. In March 1994, he married his third wife, Leona Stapleton, after moving to Indiana. There isn't much information about their relationship, but I do know that the marriage didn't last very long. He probably asked her to take out a life insurance policy on herself, and she was like, I'm gonna go get some milk and I'll be back. And just, filed divorce papers and ran. They separated in February 1995, less than a year after getting married, and Leona died later from lung cancer in 2006. Only a few months after separating from Leona, Tommy met a recently divorced woman named Gaina Alman. They married in October 1995, but during their marriage, Gaina said something happened that made her believe that Tommy had tried to kill her. One day, Tommy was supposedly cleaning a gun while they were standing in the kitchen when the weapon suddenly went off. The bullet went in Gaina's direction and left a hole in the wall. Lambs! What would you do if that happened? Tell me in the comments below. Would you believe, oh, my bad. Oh, I'm so sorry. I was cleaning my gun. I had the safety off. It just happened to be facing you. And oh my God, I'm so sorry. Would you believe that? That's too many coincidences in one. I'm out. I'm gone. Tommy, of course, said it was an accident, but Gaina didn't believe him. She took a page out of Kai's book. She thought he had aimed the gun at her on purpose, and she left the marriage because she was scared for her life, as she should have. Because that, sir, is way too many coincidences. So in true Tommy fashion, he was like, yeah, I'll just get another one. And in August of 1997, he married his fifth wife, Frances Thomas. Frances had a daughter named Rachel Gaskins, and in April 2004, Frances went into the hospital for heart surgery. According to her family, the surgery went well, and she seemed to be recovering. However, while Frances was still in the hospital, Tommy stopped Rachel from seeing her mother and asked to be left alone with Frances. Why are you stopping Rachel from seeing her mother? And then, you guessed it, Tommy was the last person known to have seen her alive. A short time later, he came out of the room and told Rachel that her mother was dead. Frances was cremated within 24 hours. There was no autopsy, and Rachel never got to see her mother's body or attend a funeral. Tommy later sent parts of Frances's ashes to family members inside a prescription pill bottle. And then he also received money from her life insurance policy and later collected a settlement after suing the hospital for wrongful death. It's like a full-time job with this guy. By that point, people had started questioning why so many of Tommy's wives had either died or said that they were afraid of him. Tommy dismissed all of it and said that the deaths were caused by illnesses and medical complications that had nothing to do with him. Quote, "If cancer is suspicious, then I guess I'm a killer. If dying of a botched surgery for a heart defect is suspicious, then I guess I'm a killer. But I didn't give them any of that. I'm just addicted to love. I'm a true romantic. That does not make me a killer." By the summer of 2005, Tommy had already been married 5 times. 2 marriages had ended in divorce, 2 wives had died, and Leona would die the following year. That summer, he met Sharon through an online dating website. As their relationship became more serious, Tommy moved from Utah to Las Vegas to be with her. And in 2006, they got married during a cruise with the ship's captain performing the ceremony. Sharon loved going to the movies and was described by her daughter, Colleen Byer, as kind, loving, and generous. However, as time went on, some of Sharon's friends and family members became worried about her relationship. Her friend and coworker, Alice Wolf, said that the marriage wasn't going well during its final months and that she often told Sharon that she was concerned. Another friend, Antoinette Beam, became uncomfortable when Sharon told her that she and Tommy had gone shopping for matching urns, even though Sharon was still healthy. What did he tell her? We must be prepared, baby. Colleen also said that Tommy had actually started talking about life insurance and matching urns only a few months into the relationship. Within 2 years of marrying Sharon, Tommy had taken out several life insurance policies on her, and the policies were worth more than $300,000. Although some of the reports, when I was looking up, they placed the totals closer to like $360,000 or $400,000. So let's just say between $300,000 and $400,000 because there wasn't a consistent amount throughout the reports. Now, at the same time, he is with Sharon, trying to convince her to take out life insurance policies and buy matching urns. He was talking to another woman. When is enough for you, Tommy? Elizabeth Lavadora had met Tommy through an online dating website in Utah, and their on-again, off-again relationship continued while he was married to Sharon. At one point, Tommy even suggested that Elizabeth, you guessed it, take out a $150,000 life insurance policy on herself, and he offered to pay for it as long as he was listed as the beneficiary of half of the money. Which my question is, why? Why do you want, first of all, why do you want me to take out a life insurance policy? Second of all, why do you want to be listed as a beneficiary? That's suspicious. By early 2008, Elizabeth had gotten tired of sharing him with Sharon and gave Tommy an ultimatum. Either her or me. According to Elizabeth, Tommy told her that he was going to, quote, deal with Sharon so they could be together, and around the same time, Tommy became very close with Michael, a handyman. Notice how he gets close to handyman. If you're a handyman and this Tommy guy ever comes to you, run. Michael had originally been hired to do maintenance and other small jobs around the house, but his relationship with Tommy seems to go far beyond that. The two men went target shooting together, met privately, and talked on the phone constantly. Phone records showed that between December 20th, 2007 and June 2nd, 2008, Tommy called Michael an average of 2.7 times a day. During one 6 to 8 week period, the two men exchanged more than 303 calls. I have no friends that I call that much. I am not a phone person, and if anybody called me that much, I would literally be like, please. Either you stop calling me so much, I'm not saying we have to stop talking, but you need to stop calling me so much, or this friendship cannot move forward. I'm a very direct person if you don't know that yet. And maybe that's mean to say to somebody because, they just like you and they want to talk to you, but I don't have the brain power. I can't just think about my friend. I got to think about me too. So we need to meet in the middle where we need to figure out this 303 calls within 6 to 8 weeks. That's a lot. Now, there are people out there who like talking that much. Don't knock you. It's just not me. Tommy said that they talked so much because Michael worked around the house and because they had become friends. Investigators, however, started to wonder whether those calls had anything to do with Sharon's murder. As detectives continued looking deeper, they started building a possible murder-for-hire theory. They believed Tommy offered Michael part of Sharon's life insurance money to enter the house, stage a burglary, and shoot her. Once Sharon was dead, they believed Tommy killed Michael in the garage so that he couldn't expose their plan. The hundreds of phone calls became even more suspicious when detectives learned that Tommy had given Michael about $150 only hours before the shooting. Did you just kill somebody for $150? Tommy said that the money wasn't connected to the murder. According to him, Michael regularly borrowed small amounts or did work around the house, and that was just another payment or a loan. Didn't you say he constantly stole from you? Still, when investigators looked at everything together, Tommy's explanation became harder for them to believe. Tommy went back to the precinct for another police interview on June 3rd, 2008, and once again, detectives thought that he looked unusually casual. Pause here for a second. I want to apologize to the people outside mowing their grass exactly when I decided to start recording. So I do apologize for that outside noise. I tried to ignore it, but I don't think that y'all could ignore it. So I have to address it, and I do want to apologize for that. So let's get back to the case. Detectives felt like he was more focused on controlling how the story was told rather than grieving for Sharon. It sounds exactly like the night that they found him at his house. Even with all of those suspicions, police still had a difficult case. Number one, no one had witnessed Tommy and Michael planning a murder. Number two, there was no recording of an agreement between them. Number three, and the biggest of all, was Michael was dead, so he couldn't even say, yeah, you paid me, or, this is what he told me, or anything like that. Tommy, of course, continued saying that Michael had entered the house on his own because, what are you going to say? No, I planned this? Detectives spent about 8 months gathering evidence before they finally moved forward with an arrest. In January of 2009, officers found Tommy at his mother's home in Clearfield, Utah. When they approached him, he was holding something in his hand and wouldn't immediately show officers what it was. Because they thought he might be holding a gun, they repeatedly ordered him to show his hands, and when he didn't, they used a taser. The object turned out to be a glove. Tommy was arrested and charged with the murders of Sharon and Michael. Now, even though Tommy was arrested in 2009, it took almost 9 years for the case to finally go to trial. By the time he appeared in court in June 2017, Tommy was 62 years old and looked very different from the man detectives had interviewed after Sharon's death. And if you want to see the comparison photos, that is in the Patreon. Either go to the website, patreon.com/loveandmurder, or go on the app and you'll see those pictures in there if you're part of the Lamb Fam. If you're not part of the Lamb Fam, then join starting at only $3 a month and you'll see those pictures. Tommy had gained weight, his hair had turned white, and he wore it in long pigtails. Eric Tarantino hadn't seen him in decades and said that he barely recognized the man sitting in the courtroom. Tommy's behavior also brought plenty of attention before the trial even got underway. The judge ordered him to cut his hair, and instead of quietly following that order, Tommy called her incompetent. He also accused his public defender of malpractice and claimed the prosecutor was corrupt. Everybody's wrong except him. At one point, he admitted that the other attorneys had warned him that insulting the judge would only make things worse, but that didn't stop him from continuing to argue with the court. Once the trial started, prosecutors told the jury that Michael hadn't entered the house on his own that night, and they believed that Tommy's motive was money. Within 2 years of marrying Sharon, he had taken out several life insurance policies on her, worth, like I told y'all, more than $300,000. Now, an interesting note is that since the shooting was originally treated like a home invasion and an act of self-defense, Tommy was able to collect about $400,000 from the life insurance after her death. Prosecutors argued that this was exactly what Tommy had planned. Sharon would be dead, Michael would take the blame, Michael is dead so he can't say anything, and Tommy would walk away looking like the grieving husband who had killed his wife's murderer. To prove that, the state went back through the evidence investigators had gathered. They reminded the jury that Tommy's walkthrough of the shooting didn't match what police found inside the house. They also pointed to the ski mask, which didn't have any blood or bullet damage on it. So how did the bullet get to him if it didn't go through the mask that you said that he had on? They even told the jury about the hundreds of calls between Tommy and Michael in the months before the murder. They spent time shooting together, met privately, and talked often enough that prosecutors said that their relationship went far beyond even a normal friendship, let alone a friendship between a homeowner and a handyman. Elizabeth also testified about their relationship, her ultimatum to Tommy, and what he had told her. She also testified about the life insurance policy Tommy had asked her to take out on herself and the stipulations once she had gotten it. Prosecutors argued that when everything was put together, the insurance policies, his relationship with Elizabeth, the comment about dealing with Sharon, the constant calls to Michael, the money Tommy gave him, and the crime scene that didn't match his story, it showed that Sharon's death had been planned. The 911 call was also used against him. The state believed Tommy was stalling because he wanted to make sure that Sharon was dead before police and paramedics arrived and had time to possibly save her. Then the defense began defensing. They told the jury that prosecutors were taking a terrifying situation and twisting every part of that into proof of murder. According to Tommy's attorney, he had walked into his home, found Sharon badly injured, and then came face to face with an armed man. They argued that it made sense for him to be afraid that Michael might still be alive or that another person could be hiding inside the house. They also pointed out that Tommy did eventually turn Sharon over and tried to give her CPR. In their view, the prosecution was treating fear, confusion, and shock like they were signs of guilt. The defense also argued that Michael could have planned the burglary on his own. He knew Tommy, he knew Sharon, and had worked inside of their home, and he knew the layout of the house. He didn't need Tommy's help to know when they might be gone or even how to get inside. Tommy's attorney also challenged the way police interpreted the crime scene. They said detectives decided almost immediately that Tommy was guilty, and then with that thought process, they started viewing every piece of evidence through that belief. They also argued that Tommy shouldn't be expected to remember every movement, every gunshot, or every detail perfectly after such a violent confrontation. According to the defense, small differences between his reenactment and the evidence didn't prove that his entire story was a lie. However, the trial didn't stay focused only on Sharon and Michael. The judge allowed prosecutors to bring evidence about Tommy's former wives and the earlier case involving Becky's death. Eric testified about the allegations he had made in Utah decades earlier. Prosecutors used Eric's story to show what they believed was a disturbing similarity between the two cases. In both situations, Tommy was accused of involving a handyman in a staged burglary so that he could collect life insurance money after his wife's death. The difference was that Eric refused to kill Becky and lived long enough to testify. The jury also heard from Kathy and Gaina. Kathy described Tommy as controlling and psychologically abusive and told the jury that he had taken out a life insurance policy on her during their marriage. Gaina talked about the day that Tommy fired a gun in her direction while supposedly cleaning it in their kitchen. The jurors were also told about Frances's death after the heart surgery, her quick cremation, and the fact that there hadn't even been an autopsy. Then they were told about the money that Tommy received after she was dead. Prosecutors argued that all of those relationships showed a pattern involving women, insurance policies, suspicious deaths, and money. Sharon's friends and family also testified about the concerns they had before her death. The prosecution used this testimony to argue that Sharon wasn't just the unlucky victim of a burglary, she was just another wife whose death left Tommy in a position to collect a large amount of money. The defense pushed back against that argument and reminded the jury that Tommy had already been acquitted of Becky's murder. His attorney said accusations from decades earlier didn't prove what happened inside the Las Vegas home. They also argued that Leona had died from cancer and Frances had died from heart surgery. In their view, prosecutors were combining unrelated deaths and failed marriages to make Tommy look like a serial killer, and I think they were doing a damn good job of it. Tommy's personality also became part of the trial. He had often seemed casual or theatrical during police interviews, and there were times when he appeared to enjoy the attention surrounding the case. At one point, while facing the possibility of execution, he said he would feel cheated if prosecutors didn't seek the death penalty. Wow. A psychiatrist named Norton Rotman testified that Tommy had narcissistic personality traits, although he didn't consider him a sociopath. He explained that someone with those traits might act differently when cameras were around because they liked being the center of attention. The defense argued that even if Tommy was narcissistic, dramatic, or difficult to like, none of that proved that he murdered anyone. And so with all of that, after hearing all of the evidence, seeing all of the proof that was brought forward, and hearing everybody's argument, the jury began deliberating. In July 2017, they found Tommy guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and the first-degree murders of Sharon and Michael. Tommy showed very little emotion as the verdicts were read. The case then moved into the penalty phase, where the jury had to decide whether he would spend the rest of his life in prison or to be sentenced to death. Tommy's mother asked the jury to spare him. Meanwhile, Sharon's family talked about what her murder had taken from them. Colleen had been 5 months pregnant when her mother was killed, and by the time of the trial, her daughter was almost 9 years old, and she had grown up without ever getting the chance to meet her grandmother. The jury ultimately sentenced Tommy to death. Afterwards, Colleen described him as a monster, while prosecutors said that the conviction had stopped him from finding another woman and continuing the pattern they believed had gone on for years. Tommy's attorney, though, they defensed. They immediately filed an appeal. The biggest issue was the evidence the jury had heard about Becky's death and the other women from Tommy's past. Even though Tommy had been acquitted of Becky's murder, prosecutors still had been allowed to present Aaron's allegations and compare that case to Sharon's murder. His appellate attorneys argued that the jury may have convicted Tommy because of what they had heard about his past, rather than because the evidence proved what happened in 2008. In other words, the trial had become just as much about whether Tommy looked like the kind of man who would kill all his wives as it was about whether he had actually arranged the murders of Sharon and Michael. So, in December of 2020, the Nevada Supreme Court agreed that the jury shouldn't have heard some of that evidence. The court ruled that the judge had abused her discretion by allowing prosecutors to present the allegations connected to Becky's death. Since Tommy had already been acquitted in that case, the Supreme Court found that the evidence was more likely to unfairly turn the jury against him than to help them decide what happened to Sharon and Michael. Now, I know what you're doing. You're flipping over your desk. You're probably kicking through your TV. You already probably took off your headsets and was like, this is bullshit. Calm down. Just because this ruling went through, it didn't mean Tommy was innocent. The court wasn't saying that Michael had acted alone or that Tommy's home invasion story was true. They were just saying that the jury had heard evidence that could have kept them from looking at the 2000 case fairly. Because of that, Tommy's conviction and death sentence were overturned, and the court ordered a new trial. After spending years on death row, Tommy would once again face charges for the murders of Sharon and Michael. This time, though, prosecutors wouldn't be allowed to tell the jury about Becky's death or Eric's allegations. They would have to prove their case using only the direct evidence connected to what happened inside that house on May 8th, 2008. By the time Tommy's retrial began, 15 years had passed since Sharon and Michael were killed. The second trial started in Las Vegas on August 11th, 2023. Chief Deputy District Attorneys Christopher Hamner and Pamela Weckerly represented the prosecution, while attorney Josh Tomchek led the defense. Both sides agreed that Michael shot Sharon and that Tommy later shot Michael in the garage. What they disagreed on was why Michael had been inside the house in the first place. The defense once again said that Michael had acted alone, and according to them, he entered the home to commit burglary, shot Sharon, basically the whole thing all over again. And the prosecution said their entire case all over again too, saying that Michael wasn't a random intruder at all, and that Tommy had hired him to kill Sharon, promised him part of the insurance money, and then shot him once the job was done so that Michael couldn't reveal their nefarious plans. They also brought Elizabeth back in to testify. And with that testification, prosecutors argued that all of this gave Tommy two reasons to want Sharon gone. Her death would free him to be with Elizabeth, and it would also leave him with a large insurance payout. So basically, it was like two paychecks in one. He would have gotten this insurance payout. He would have gotten with Elizabeth. Hopefully, she would have done the insurance policy with him as the beneficiary, and then he would have, on and on and on. They didn't say that in court. I'm saying that. Then once again, the jury listened to the 911 call, and they heard how many times the dispatcher had to tell Tommy to go back and start CPR on Sharon. Remember, that was like 14 or 15 times. And the defense repeated their argument. Nah, yaha, nah, yaha. You're touching my face. No, I'm not. Get away, mommy. I'm going to turn this car around. Blah, blah, blah. So when this trial came to an end, both sides returned to the same question. Did Michael enter the home alone, or had Tommy brought him into the house as part of a plan to kill Sharon? During closing arguments, prosecutors asked the jury to look at everything together. The phone calls could have been explained as friendship. The $150 could have been a loan. The mask and extra clothes could have belonged to Michael. And Tommy's behavior during the 911 call could have been fear. However, when you put all of those details together, they told one story. Tommy had arranged Sharon's murder, staged a burglary, and killed Mike so no one else would know the truth. The defense's closing statement was that suspicion wasn't enough. The prosecution had presented a theory, but Tommy was entitled to be found not guilty unless that theory had been proven beyond a reasonable doubt. On August 24th, 2023, after about 4 to 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with his decision. Tommy was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder and 2 counts of first-degree murder for the deaths of Sharon and Michael. I remember saying that sentence just, 20 minutes ago? So basically, you're still guilty, sir. Go back to prison where you belong. When the verdict was read, Colleen gasped and covered her mouth with her hands. After 15 years of waiting through trials, appeals, and delays, she was relieved. Quote, "I'm absolutely ecstatic. He's a predator. He's a serious predator." She described the years since her mother's death as a twisted nightmare that had finally reached another ending. Unlike the first trial, prosecutors didn't ask for the death penalty this time. Tommy later thanked them for that decision, but not because he was grateful to have avoided execution. He believed that without a death sentence, he would be able to move his appeal through the courts faster. What a load of crap. Like, he is a load of crap. Piece of poop. His sentencing hearing was held on April 4th, 2024, and by that time, he was 69 years old. He appeared in court in a wheelchair, wore hearing aids, and claimed that he had dementia and other health problems. Really? Before Judge Tierra Jones announced his sentence, Tommy spoke for about 15 minutes. He still refused to accept responsibility. Quote, "I didn't kill Sharon. I had nothing to do with this." Instead, Tommy criticized other people connected to the case. He even attacked Colleen and tried to blame her for her mother's death. In what universe, sir? Judge Jones wasn't persuaded, and she sentenced Tommy to 60 years to life in Nevada State Prison. For the conspiracy charge, he received 4 to 10 years. For Sharon's murder, he received 20 years to life, along with an additional 8 to 20 years for using a deadly weapon. He received the exact same sentence for Michael's murder. The sentences were ordered in a way that made it very likely that Tommy would spend the rest of his life in prison. I mean, he's already 65. Even after being convicted by a second jury, Tommy continued to describe himself as a romantic man who had experienced an unbelievable amount of bad luck. He still denied killing Sharon, arranging her murder, or being responsible for the deaths of any of his other wives. His legal fight also continued. On April 18th, 2024, Tommy was scheduled to return to court so attorneys could be appointed to handle another appeal. This appeal would have been different from the one that overturned his first conviction. The second jury hadn't heard the evidence about Becky's death, so his attorney would have to find another legal reason to challenge the trial. And as of now, that appeal was still pending. Tommy remained incarcerated at Lovelock Correctional Center in Nevada, serving his 60 years to life sentence, while continuing to claim that Michael had acted alone and that he had only shot him in self-defense. However, to be fair, 2 separate juries reached a similar conclusion, and now you're in prison, so dude, deal with it. For Colleen, that case had taken 15 years to reach that point. Remember, she was 5 months pregnant with her child. That child is 15 years old by the time of this second sentencing. Tommy still says that investigators built the case around his personality, his marriages, and the suspicious deaths connected to his past. Prosecutors have always maintained that the motive was so much simpler than that. Money. Now, with a 60-year-to-life sentence in place, Tommy is going to spend the rest of his life in prison while continuing to insist that he isn't the black widower that prosecutors described him as. He's just a man with an extraordinary amount of bad luck who just loves love. And that is the case of a man who was basically a black widow, I guess, because he's a guy, and he made murder his full-time job. Like, literally, he got life insurance policies, killed them, and then got money. Went and married another woman, got life insurance, and some of them overlapped. Just his full-time job. Craziness. Anyway, what are your thoughts on this case? I want to hear them in the comments below. This guy was a serial killer. I agree with what the prosecution was saying. It just all looks suspicious. There's no actual hard facts that says he murdered his wife. But I also agree with the prosecution. That's too many coincidences. Just like when he fired the gun at his wife. That was too many coincidences rolled in one. Too many coincidences close together. Absolutely not. You're not a man with an extraordinary amount of bad luck. You're a dude who's a serial killer and murdered all his wives. That's just what it is. So which one do you believe? Do you believe what he says? Like, oh, well, the mother just died of a heart attack, or, complications of the surgery. Sharon just killed herself. Becky killed herself, and is just a whole lot of bad luck that surrounds him. He's just a man that loves love. And unfortunately, love doesn't love him. Which one do you think it is? Let me know in the comments below. And before you go, don't forget to check out our Patreon, patreon.com/love and murder. If you want pictures from this case, for instance, you do get that as case extras, which are bonuses in the Patreon. You do also get bonus episodes like the after shows, if there's an after show to cases, or you'll get bonus episodes just for the Patreon subscribers. You also get Kai Rants, where I take the most insane cases that you couldn't even think up, and I rant about them in the Patreon. You also get access to, whenever there's certain episodes that come out, early release episodes, and so much more. You become a voice of the victim. You help keep this podcast going, and you help keep it listener funded, all by becoming part of the Lamb Fam, which is by choosing one of the paid tiers starting at $3 a month or above. Patreon.com/love and murder. If you just want to be a free subscriber so that you don't miss an episode, you can also do that in the Patreon. Patreon.com/love and murder. Just choose the free tier, and you do get a little bit of bonuses for being a free subscriber. Now, if this case made you go, and you want to share this with one of your friends, maybe there's somebody out there that's going through something similar, and you've been trying to tell them, this guy is a red flag, or this woman is a red flag, please listen, and you think that this case would help their situation, help them get out of that, then go ahead and share this case to that friend. Share it to a friend of a friend who is in a similar situation. Share it with somebody who's not even in the situation. You never know what people are going through. You can also share it to your social media, because you never know who it's going to reach, or you can share it to one of your favorite true crime groups on Facebook or on Reddit. Sharing these cases does help get more ears on the victim's story and shed light on the victim's story, as well as, it does get the podcast heard by more ears, which in turn helps my goal of getting the listener story out there. So go ahead and share it. And I do want to thank you for your support. I do want to thank you for being either a public Lamb Fam or part of the Patreon Lamb Fam. Either way, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. And as we end each full episode, I want to remind you that it's, say it with me now, all love and no murder, y'all. Thank you for everything, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.